Hey everyone, welcome to episode 2 of the podcast.
Episode 2.
Today we're gonna be today we're gonna be discussing Dare to Lead by Brené Brown.
Yes.
Great book. This is the second book that I read by her. If you end up reading this and like it, I suggest reading Braving the Wilderness as well because it's really good.
Yeah.
So as usual, I'm Paige Flipper, PAYGE_FLIPPER Flipper. Follow me on Instagram. And then Terrance, share with us your Instagram.
What's up? My name is Terrance. For those who don't know me, and many of you probably don't, especially if you're a Paige friend and you're randomly listening on the internet. So my Instagram, you can follow me at Terrance with an extra E 95. So let me spell that out. It's TERRANCEE 95. Follow me on Instagram. I wish I could have Terrance 95, but someone took that name. And I wish I could also have Terrance, but someone also took that name. So, that's just the game when you're on the internet. So follow me, check your boy out. What's up?
Terrance.
It's French. It's sophisticated. It's very, that's I'm going to use that. Yes. It's Terrance with an extra E.
It's high class.
It's high class. Like,
okay.
I'm going to stick my pinky up every time I sip my tea when I type out my Instagram for somebody. So yeah, check us out. But, back to the book at hand. This book recommendations from, Paige. And when I first read this book, it really hit me in a time of my life where I think I needed to take a different approach to a lot of things that were happening. I feel like I've been going through kind of like a growth or more of like a transformation period over these last couple of months. Time will tell what that transformation will lead to. But, this book hit me at a very perfect time in my life. And the book, I hit you up halfway through and I actually reversed my opinion and said, I don't know if I like this book and I don't know if this book applies to me. But after finishing it, I was kind of wrong, because the reason why I say that, and the listeners might want to keep this in mind if they read it and they come with the exact same perspective, is that the book takes a lot of these topics such as fear, vulnerability, ego, the armor, empathy, perfectionism, and they talk about it in many cases from a corporate leadership perspective. It's called Daring Leadership. Is that the book name? Sorry.
Dare to Lead.
Yeah, right. So it's called Dare to Lead. So it talks about it from a leadership perspective, but a lot of these topics I feel are very universal and you can apply it in your personal life. And I have been doing that recently. So I think the book is actually valuable, even if it doesn't 100% connect with you or 100% resonate with you. What I found from the book is that I would take some of these, what I feel to be very universal topics, and I would do continuous research on it. Like I would Google fear, I would Google the ego, I would Google the armor, which will lead me to other books and lead me to other articles. And I was able to have this mini curriculum that extended even beyond the book. So I liked it. It was a good pick, Paige.
Oh, thank you. This was actually suggested to me by a friend. So shout out to them. I'm not going to put their name out there, but shout out, you know who you are. Thank you for referencing this book or, giving me this book or as a suggestion. The book talks like you said, about a lot of things, fear, vulnerability, shame, the armor that we carry around with us every day. Yeah. But one of the things that I really took from this book was the idea of big, B-I-G. Mm-hmm. Not Biggie Smalls, but big.
Yeah.
Not a Big Mac. And big stands for...
What does it mean, Paige? What does it mean?
Big stands for boundaries, integrity, and generosity.
Okay.
And in the context of my life, I, for the longest, had the hardest time setting boundaries. And the book takes on the perspective that, hey, if setting boundaries is one of the first steps, the second step is enforcing it. But in order to even set those boundaries, you have to kind of know your core values. And that's where integrity comes into play. You have to have the integrity to uphold your core values at all times.
Yeah.
And that's challenging. In the book, they have this long page of 100, 170 plus. It was a lot of different values that you might have. They had faith, empathy, generosity, caringness, etc. Mine personally was integrity and understanding.
Okay.
In any given situation, I want to come into it with the perspective that my my first goal is to have integrity and to act my authentic self, my true self, and to share my authentic opinions and ideas. But then the second thing I want to bring into any conversation is a level of understanding or enough curiosity to aim towards understanding other people, other people's beliefs, etc., even in challenging times. And for me, my boundaries revolve around that. So,
Mm-hmm.
for instance, for the longest time, I had a really hard time with loaning money.
Yeah.
I would, because part of it was because I felt like that was how I showed love, is partly like, hey, I love you, I'm going to help you, this is how I choose to help you. And the other part of that is, not wanting to let people down, not wanting them to be disappointed, and just the inability to say no. And that put me in some really awkward situations. um, and I want to emphasis on borrow and not give. It's different when you're giving, but borrowing is something completely different.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. It
anywho,
has.
that enforced me. Oh, sorry,
I
go
would
ahead.
say it has strings attached. So, in many ways, it does make you more vulnerable because, giving, if done correctly, you can just give selflessly and no longer think about it. But when you're borrowing something, you're expecting that back. And at that moment, whatever they have, the power is in their hands. They control it. So you are relying and trusting somebody in that moment. So, in many ways, just borrowing money is just almost like a friendship test, or borrowing anything is almost like
Yeah.
a relationship test. It just naturally is. And I don't mean people don't think it's a big deal, but when someone betrays you, and maybe not give you your money back or not give it to you in a very specific time, it does have an impact on the relationship. And they may try to minimize that, but you feel that pain.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's something that people don't really understand. But I don't know, like in those situations, I don't 100% blame that other person. Because
Really?
again, going back to my inability to say no, some of these times I knew I shouldn't have done it. But even though I had a boundary there in my mind, I didn't enforce that
Yeah.
boundary. So when someone asked me, I still felt obligated to say, sure, here you go. Instead of being like, you know what? Using my integrity and authenticity, I do not feel comfortable doing this for X, Y, and Z. But instead, I said, oh, here you go. That's on me. So I feel like there's a level of accountability that comes with this. So when you're setting boundaries, you are 100% accountable to enforce
Yeah.
them. And in this situation, even though it's disappointing when someone does that, if you knew from jump that they were probably going to do that, and you still did it, even though you didn't want to, at some level, I have to take ownership of that as well. And the book put that in perspective. Is like, hey, this was a boundary that was breached, but I allowed it to be breached.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's
Has that ever happened to you?
all of the time,
Sorry.
all of the time. I could give stories, but many of my closest friends are listening to this podcast, so the story would be about them. So it will be what's it called, a bit of a sneak this. So I won't get any I won't get into the specifics. But that have happened to me plenty of times where I expected something of somebody because in many ways we establish an agreement. That's like a contract, and then people would just dishonor those contracts and that agreement and just keep it moving, act like it's not a big deal. And yeah, sure, it's probably small, so materialistically, it's small materialistically, so I will move on. But the actual the strength of our relationship, it riddles away, and it doesn't have the opportunity to get stronger, because if I can't trust you with smaller things, I can't trust you with bigger things. Because who you are, and this is the important thing that I guess many people need to understand. Maybe that's the wrong way of phrasing it, because I'm not a preacher, but how you treat small things and how you treat things when no one else is looking says a lot about how you may potentially treat big things. So at least for me, I strive to walk down the path of consistency, even if it's something small. I acknowledge it compared to something big as well, because if anything, I just want to have the habit of doing that. So when that big thing do occur, it's like game day. I'm like ready for it. I went to practice for it.
Mm-hmm.
So when you mention boundaries, especially the boundaries of giving, it can be quite tough. There's been so many times that I've given things in my life, and Like, I will hope that that person will give back in return, or return my things, what they haven't. And, it does bother me. So yeah, my boundaries may actually like shrink afterwards. And then I would get to a point where, like, you know what? I'm not going to hand this person anything out anymore. Or I may even punish future people who have nothing to do with it, because I've been hurt so many times that this new person has nothing to do with it. I'm just going to carry the expectation they're going to do something wrong. And maybe that's not right either, but maybe it's not right either, but it's something that I have to think about.
That makes sense. Uh, when people experience any type of disappointment or pain, I think it is one of those two reactions. It's either I'm just going to affect the person that affected me by, like you said, minimizing the
Uh,
boundaries, or, putting more stricter boundaries up, or I'm going to carry forth these more stricter boundaries with everyone else.
okay.
And that's the third thing in big is generosity. And I think that that's what helps me still be able to give to certain people, and yeah, and not move forward with like a bad taste in my mouth from previous people, is the thought of generosity. And that is believing that giving people the most generous benefit of the doubt that you can possibly give. And that just helps me in any situation, because if I assume the most positive intent, it opens up the space for
Yeah.
conversation, or it just gives me peace of mind to say, hey, it's I think they said this in this book, or maybe it was another book, I don't remember which book it was in, but it was funny because they're like, when someone does wrong to you, you have two options. Well, you have a few options, but I just want to highlight
Hmm.
two. The first option is to say, yo, this person is absolute trash.
I think that was in the book.
And the second option, and then being like, this person is absolute trash. They intentionally did this to hurt me. And with all of that, now I'm
Yeah.
angry. Or the second option is to say, hey, this person did the best that they could with the tools that they had.
Yeah.
And yes, it still might be shortcoming, but it was still their
Yeah.
best. And then that kind of softens it up. You could still be mad, of course, but it makes you a little bit less mad, because you're like, hey, this person did their best. Their best didn't meet my standards, and that just means that I need to have different boundaries with this person. But it takes it, at least that helps me not hold on to negative
Yeah.
feelings in the process.
Yeah, and I mean, that moment of, I guess, letting go. I mean, that's something that we all practice on. There's another thing I want to ask you about, because you spoke a lot about, boundaries and generosity, and the other letter is I, which is integrity. Could you go in deeper about that? Like, tell me, what do you think integrity means to you?
Ooh. So integrity to me means, one, being
Yeah.
honest, having ethic, or being remaining ethical, or whatever your ethic or your beliefs are.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last one to me is to have authenticity
Mm-hmm.
and to be your authentic self. And a lot of times, let's just talk about corporate America for a moment, or corporate international, because you're not in the US. Let's talk
Yeah.
about
Corporate
corporate
worldwide. Yeah.
international. So, like, especially, and it's to some of my viewers, maybe I know some of my Black viewers will know this. Code switching. Code switching means we're not being our authentic selves. Of course, we're doing it to assimilate to some degree, but you're not being your authentic self. And that, I'm not even going to get into that's a whole nother rant. But I was going to go on a long tangent. But if I were, and granted, there's not always a space to be your authentic self. I just want to, point that out, so that way people understand that there's not always a space to be your authentic self. There should
Yeah.
be. But in any given situation, when it comes to setting boundaries, um you need to have integrity. And when somebody crosses that boundary, you need to have generosity. And the integrity is to say, hey, this is the boundary, these are the consequences, this is how I feel, and then enforce that. To me, that's integrity.
Okay.
It's showing up how you want to show up every day.
Now, we're all human. And even when we
Yeah.
set these values, we define these things mentally, sometimes we fall short. Um, Has there been a time that maybe you fell short of your, I guess your BIG boundaries, integrity, and generosity? And if so, I guess how does that make you feel?
Yeah. So I falter. What's that song? We fall down,
Get
but we
up,
get
yeah,
up. Uh, so there has been times where I have fallen back on my boundaries or laxed my boundaries. There's actually a specific situation that's going on right now, but I'm not going to talk about it because I don't want to put nobody on blast. But
yeah,
I'll just give a very vague explanation so no one knows that I'm talking about them, I guess. I don't know. I don't put nobody on blast. But there has been times where I have fall short of boundaries where I wanted to say no. I should have said
yeah,
no. I had every intention of saying no. But sometimes you get the sob story. Sometimes you get the guilt trip.
yeah.
And then you're like, damn it.
Yeah, I've been there.
And this happened
Hmm.
recently.
Yeah, yeah. So do you? So when you fall short, oftentimes many of us, I guess, we go into we go into a mode of self talk, and inside of our heads, maybe we start to critique ourselves. We start to become judgmental. Do you feel like you do things like that when that happens when you fall short?
Not to the degree that I used
Yeah,
to. So I read this other book a little bit a while ago that talks about it's like inner critic, inner
yeah.
self, and it talks about how to combat that negative talk because we all have it, whether it's your boundaries or whatever else. Whenever you fall short or fail at
Hmm.
anything, you can have this negative self-talk that's like, oh, you're so weak, you're this, you're that, blah 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 blah. And for me personally, I just ask myself, like, when I catch myself in that negative mindset, I'm like, pause. Is that even true? Is that 100% true? Not 50% true, not 99.9. Is this so? Say I'm saying, oh my gosh, you're so weak.
Wow.
So is that 100% true? Am I 100% a weakling?
Huh.
And most of the time, the answer is no. You're nothing 100%. So it's like in this moment, I did this to help X, Y, and Z. And usually for me to avoid that negative self-talk or to pull myself out of it, first ask that question, is this 100% true? And like the 100 almost 99.99% of the time the answer is no. Go on with the level of compassion for myself and say, "Hey, you're still learning
Yeah.
to set these boundaries. Like this is relatively new for you. Like I just started setting boundaries last year. So I'm like, this is relatively new for you. You're going to mess up. This is okay. Don't even consider this a mess up. Just consider this as something that a decision that you wish you would have done a little bit
Yeah.
differently." And from there, I either have I have compassion for myself, and then I have generosity or think that the person is doing the best that they can with the tools that they have, and that just kind of just really helps me avoid that negative talk.
Man, like
So
believe it or not, like that's something that I never even thought about. I mean, I guess in a way I have, but you actually phrased it really well, and I might have to check that book out, and I'm going to add it to my own list. You said it's called Inner Critic, Inner Self,
yep.
because that relationship that we have, I guess, with ourselves, or like it's probably like the most important relationship we'll ever have in our life. Like, how you treat yourself would say so much about how you treat someone else in a relationship, whether it's a partner
Mm-hmm.
romantically, friends, colleagues, coworkers, or even subordinates if you are in leadership positions at your job. Like, who we are and how we treat ourselves is the main, I guess, root that all the other roots like extend from. So we can, I guess, change the way that we speak to ourselves. In many ways, it can actually make us a more compassionate person, and it can make our relationships with other people a whole lot better. So, yeah, I like what you said there a lot, and I'm probably gonna do some reflecting
Thank
on that
you.
because that was really dope.
Oh, thank
Yeah,
you. Turn up.
yeah, yeah, for sure.
And into transition a bit, I want to touch on the fact that you said when you have a better relationship inward, you can have a better relationship
Yeah,
outward. And when you have compassion for yourself and empathy for
yeah,
yourself, you can have compassion and empathy for others. And I think that is a good way to talk about, or to bring us to our next point, or so the next reflection point of the book, which is empathy.
Yes, yes. Yeah, you cannot
Um,
give what you don't have. Go ahead, break it down. What's empathy?
exactly. Oh, snap. Okay. Empathy is not connecting to an experience. And I'm reading this verbatim from the book, just FYI. Empathy is not connecting to an experience. It's connecting to the emotions that underpin the
Yeah.
experience. So it's basically connecting you to a shared feeling. You don't have to have, so for instance, Terrance and I, let's say, Terrance, have you ever broken an ankle or sprained an ankle?
Um, no, no. I'm just that good at
Perfect. This
life.
is
I'm joking.
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm terrible. I sprained the same one three
Yeah,
times. So I'm bad at
yeah,
life. I'm a klutz. But with that being said, you've never sprained an ankle. So if you saw me with a busted ankle walking around town, sure, you can't empathize with the experience because you haven't sprained an ankle before.
mm,
But you've been hurt
yeah,
before, I'm assuming. You've fallen
yeah,
before. So you can empathize with the underlying feeling, which is
yeah,
pain.
yeah.
And that's pretty much what empathy is. Some people confuse and say, "Hey, I've never been through that, so I don't know how you feel." But you might have had a similar experience where that underlying feeling, whether it's sadness or happiness, even joy, pain, whatever, you shared as well.
So, so Brené Brown, the author of the book, and that she has this wonderful cartoon that was she referenced inside the book, but I actually went on her website to go actually watch it. And she talks about the differences between empathy, sympathy, and I think the last one may be judgment. And she had this
Mm.
cartoon where she painted this picture of, when you go through a dark time, when you go through a rough time or anything of the sort, it's like you're falling into a hole. And and there's different responses that the people can do in those moments if you feel like you're falling. I think the right way, which was the empathetic thing, is in the cartoon, the character who was inside of the hole, there was another character looking from above the hole. They took a ladder and they climbed down the hole with them, and they told the cartoon character hey, I might not know what you feel, but I'm right here with you, and we're gonna get through this together, and we're gonna make it out this hole together. And like that was a visual illustration what empathy is. Sympathy is someone, like, I guess, being on top of the hole and not climbing down there with you to fully understand, being like, "Aw, you fell down," like,
Sucks
that,
to
that
suck.
sucks. And like I think in the cartoon, the person who's just like eating a bag of popcorn, like, yeah, man, you'll be okay. And that doesn't make us feel good. In many ways, it kind of minimizes us, and we don't intentionally do it. But it's when you're being, I guess, too sympathetic, it can really make someone feel small. In a real, in
Hmm.
a very real way. And I think the last one, I could be wrong about this last one, but it was like judgment. And like this one is like, if you fall into a hole, someone like, yo, get your ass up. Like, you gotta get up.
You
Or
shouldn't be down
yeah, like, you
there.
shouldn't be down. Like, what are you doing? How could you fall into that hole? You didn't see that coming. And it's like that is like the last response. And we all have people who fall into these different spectrums of these topics. And I gotta be honest, at least for me, I think I hit all three of those. I mean, I'm not gonna sit here on this podcast and pretend like I never done all of these things. In my best version of me, I am trying to be more empathetic. I say certainly right now that's something that I really want to strive for. But I have been sympathetic, and when I do a self inventory and a self reflection in moments I have been sympathetic, maybe I wasn't actually invested into what that person was feeling. So I was just giving, like, what she said in the first chapter of the book, cheap seat feedback. Like, I'm all like if life is an arena, and like you're battling out in this arena, you're trying to, like, perform in this arena. I'm the guy all the way in the back of the stands, just like yelling at the person and giving cheap seat feedback when I'm not actually in there fighting. And then the judgment, the last part, that's just a heckler. And I highly doubt that ever helps somebody. I mean, maybe in like the most extreme sports situations we have a coach, but it's just not good, and it's not something you want to have with at least a loved one or someone you care about.
Yeah, for sure. I I hate the judgmental part of things
Yeah.
when you're already in the hole. You don't need nobody like, at the top yelling down like, yo, get out the hole, you good for nothing. Like you said, it's a
Yeah.
heckler. Have you ever been on the opposite side where you're in the hole?
Uh-huh.
And have you had an experience where you're in the hole and somebody is giving you sympathy instead of
I
empathy?
mean, yeah, and judgment, like, I mean, I guess especially from people you grow up with and family and friends, and like, and of course people who just who want to see you fail, unfortunately. Like,
The
so
haters.
yeah. So much of my life has been like, I've been doing things that would naturally put people in vulnerable positions. Like, I started off being like, an artist of sorts. I made music, I made poetry, I wrote raps, I did photography. All of these things, they require people to, like, in a way, validate it. They give their own opinion on something. And you will often hear from people who have no invested interest in what you're doing, who don't want to see you improve, and they just give you like the harshest of critiques. And some of those critiques, to be quite frank, is it's not valid. And like oftentimes, like I will probably challenge them and fight back. To be quite honest, I'm the type of person that defend my art and my decision. If you're gonna be in the cheap seat yelling at me, I'm gonna yell back like, yo, like, you are absolutely wrong. But nowadays I might actually just ignore those people. So yeah, a lot of it is just filtering things out. I heard this quote, it says like, in a room of 10 people, 3 people are gonna like it, 3 people aren't gonna like it, and 4 people are just not gonna give a F. And I think that really, like, rings well when it comes to empathy, sympathy, and people who are just heckling. Like, you will have people who are going to be right there with you and they connect with you, and that's just who they are as a person in their life journey. Then you have those people who may, just be sympathetic, and they might not give you exactly what you want, and you just recognize that for what it is. And then you have those people who are just going to judge you. I think the best thing you can do in those moments is just understand that how these people treat you in this moment says more about you than what they're actually, no, sorry. How people treat you in this moment says more about them than what they're actually talking about. So you have to learn when to filter that out, because when you're accepting feedback and critique, it's good to listen, but it's also good to consider who's giving that to you. Did that answer your question?
That makes sense. Yeah, that answers the question.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I want to touch on something else that Brené said in the book. So she said that she gave like 6 examples of what empathy is not.
Go for it.
And I would just want to read a few, and I'm gonna probably add a little bit of commentary because some of these I have definitely experienced. So chime in too if you've experienced any of these.
Yeah.
The first one we pretty much touched on, being sympathetic instead of empathetic. The second one is gasp and awe. So it's an exaggeration, like, OMG, if that happened to me, I would die. The third one is the mighty fall, which actually recently happened to me a couple days ago, where the person is like, oh my gosh, like, I never expected that you would do that, or this would happen to you, or that you were, basically they're putting you on a pedestal, and now that you're in the hole, they're like, oh my gosh, I never thought you'd be in that hole. Never thought that.
Yeah.
That recently just happened to me, and I was, minding my own business in my hole, trying to climb my way out. And someone had asked me a question, and I answered truthfully. And they were like, basically saying, if you wouldn't think, they're asking me what I would think.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I wouldn't think anything of it. I would just think that this person's brain works differently, right? And they were like, are you sure you think that person was stupid? Little did they know that I would fall in that category as stupid for what they were asking me, because that's how my brain works too. And so I told them, like, hey, maybe you're being a little bit, like, this is a little judgmental. And I was like, I do X, Y, and Z as well. And they're like, no, you don't. I'm like, no, I'm in that same hole with that person.
Look, Paige, I apologize to you about this like 5 times, man. Like, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to call you stupid. I'm joking. That wasn't me. That was not me who did that.
But the whole time I'm like, I'm in this hole with this person, and they were mortified that I fall in that
Yeah.
category of being in that hole. And I told them like, hey, they're like, why haven't you ever told me this before? And I'm like, because I got made fun of because of this.
Hmm.
And obviously I did right by not telling, because they're like, I wouldn't make fun of you. But I'm like, obviously you would have, because you think the person is
Yeah.
stupid. Therefore, you think I'm stupid.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things you got to be careful of.
Have you?
Is that whole,
No,
yeah.
sorry. I might actually be revealing one on the list, but you named several so far. But is one of them problem matching? Like, I feel like have you
Yes. Talk about it. Talk
have
about
you
it.
ever met someone who you come to with a problem? I have a couple of people in my life who do this
They one up
all
you.
of the time. Yeah, it drives me insane, and
I know who you talking
I
about. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
and I've gotten to the point where I'm very impatient when someone do that to me, and I just check them
Yeah.
because for a long time, like I would come to someone with a problem of mine, and they would immediately try to like compare it and one up me, thinking they're being empathetic when they're not. And it's to the point where it's like, you're no longer listening to what I have to say. We're going on this long diatribe and this long tangent about whatever it is that you're trying to tell me to connect with my story, but you don't actually do a explicit connection. This feels more like, okay, Terrance introduced this platform of what he's going through, so let me make this about me. And that stuff drives me insane. And nowadays, I kind of have very
Yeah.
short patience. It's to the point that I'm so sensitive about people who try to problem match me that if I'm listening to someone, they're telling me something, and for whatever reason, I find the need to like give a story of my life. I try to make it short and abundantly clear why I think this connects, and then I wrap it around because even in that example, I don't want to
Hmm.
remove the spotlight from you because I understand if you're coming to me with this problem, then you probably want to be heard. Like, so
Yeah.
let me hear you instead of you being like, yeah, you come to my office about a problem, so let me tell you about my problem. Can you imagine if a therapist did that to you? Like, yo,
Oh my
like,
gosh. Like, oh, I've been through that too. Let me tell you about this
like you
time. Put
be
the
sitting
glasses
there like,
on.
are you kidding me? So
And you still getting paid. I'm still charging you for the
yeah,
session.
so then I hope I didn't spoil the list because I was wondering like,
No,
is this a
no.
part of the list? Because me and you got two different notes, so I don't know. I'm like, man, that because I feel like that's when
Yes.
people are trying to be empathetic and they fall short. There's a certain category of people who just like let me problem match them. I don't know if they're doing this on purpose or they just really want to vent, but man, it drives me insane.
No, no, that is on the list. And the funny thing is, I really think that those individuals are people who fall in that category, they really are trying to connect, and maybe they have this preconceived notion or this false ideal that, hey, if I share my experience and show you that it's similar, that validates what I'm talking about when I give you
Yeah,
advice. That's how I
yeah.
take it. Whereas like, oh, I've been through the same thing. This is how I handled it. You should handle it too. And you should listen to me because I went through the same thing. And also let me vent about it.
And that's not good because everybody is different. Like what might work for me might not work for you. And also, as much as you try to make the situation the same, it is not the
Hmm.
same. The characters in the story are different. Our feelings, our values are different. And if you're trying to like, tell me what's best for you in this situation, then I hate to break it to you, I'm not you in this situation. So maybe what you say might hit me and I might take some away from it, but oftentimes I don't. And it just becomes like, I don't know, it just becomes an exercise in futility when people are trying to problem at you. I will say this.
Hmm.
I am moving slightly away from problem matching and just talking about the book in general. A
Yeah.
lot of these topics in the book, I kind of wish that we had like in the schools, like learned about these things. Can you imagine if we had like a communications class and not like communications like how they teach it in college, but like
Like public
yeah, not
speaking.
that. I'm talking about like an actual like connecting with people type communication because so much of, success, so much of our careers and so much of our aptitude in our own personal life has to do with our communication skills, our EQ, our emotional intelligence. And, there's no rule book to this. You just kind of got to hope that your
Hmm.
parents, your environment, your life experiences teaches you this, or as we're doing right now, we go out and we seek this information because there's no rules. So to a certain extent, I can't get mad at the person problem matching me because they don't know any better. And this is what they think is what's right for them. And part of me wish that, we take the time out to teach people a lot of these things, because even what we cover so far are boundaries, integrity, generosity, empathy, problem matching, sympathy, etc. This book has so much more stuff that I feel like
Yeah.
I'm learning, or I'm becoming fully aware of it for the very first time at the age of 25. And I wonder how much of my life would have been different if I had learned some of these things in a very clear way, from a very experienced person at an earlier age.
Yeah. I guess that's the beauty. It's like bittersweet, because I think part of what makes, for me, this book so impactful is the fact that I did struggle. I was in the arena. Um, I agree that maybe if we learn these tools earlier, like start learning this stuff in elementary
Yeah.
school. But I really think it starts with the parents.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, if your parents don't have good communication skills, then one, you can't blame them, because they probably learned that from their parents and so forth, until somebody was enlightened, so to speak. Um, and so it starts with each generation just getting slightly better, for people like you and I reading these books that are, trying to really understand, even though it's later in our mid 20s, we're still young. I'm 19, but
Okay, Paige, I'm gonna keep that ruse up for you.
so I'm 19, so I have a lot a lot of time left. I don't know what took you so long,
Yeah.
Terrance, but
Yeah. Yeah. So, we can't blame people for it. These are, and as we, talk about these books and talk about these topics of the book, we're not at all positioning ourselves as experts on these topics. Me and Paige are at various degrees of aptitude when it comes to these topics. And, many, many times, like, you learn something, it is truly that's just the beginning, because the next part is to practice what you learn. And that
Yep.
practice is kind of like a road to practice. And all of us are on different different areas of that road. Like, we have progress to a certain area in that road. So, so to a certain extent, I don't project myself out to listeners to be an expert in these things, but I am aware of what's good, and I'm trying my best to walk down that path. And knowledge is power, because knowledge helps you give yourself feedback, and I guess critique what you previously did and improve. So that's just a little small tidbit that I wanted to share.
I like it.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna touch real quick on the last two, which is the block and tackle. And to be honest, I forgot what this one is. So moving on to the next,
It's okay.
which is the boots and shovel. And that's when someone exaggerates.
Well, I think you covered block and tackle partially. Like, you briefly touched bases on it. Like, yeah, Paige, you wouldn't do that. Remember that example you gave? Like,
That's the mighty fall.
Okay.
Yeah, I accidentally put the notes in the wrong spot, but that's okay.
Yeah.
So the last one we have is the boots and shovel, which is where someone basically exaggerates the situation, and takes it to a point where now you are consoling them or trying to calm them down. So for instance, let's say Terrance is in a meeting and he comes to me and he's like, "Paige, you won't believe what just happened. So and so, I don't know, cut me off and yelled at me in a meeting," right? And instead of me being empathetic and listening and, saying, "Oh my gosh, I'm here for you, let's get through this together," I'm just like, you know what? I'm going to kick their ass. And I take it to level 10, and now I'm pissed. And I'm just going off saying, I'm about to fly out there and kick some butt. And now you're trying to calm me down, and you think I'm serious. So now you're trying to calm me down and be like, "Paige, relax. And that takes the focus off of your problem, which was being humiliated in a meeting. And it now shifts it to you trying to console me or calm me down enough so I don't fly out there and kick some butt."
And that person might be thinking they're protecting you in that moment, but what they really might be doing is skipping over one of the steps in the process, which is actually listening to what you have to say and hopefully find some sort of conclusion. You can't fix someone else's problems, but you can be a listening ear and just have that conversation, give them advice, let them process it, and let them learn on their own what that advice means to them, whether or not they choose to accept it or not. And yeah, if someone like, just blows it out of proportion, it would in fact minimize whatever it is I'm talking to you about, because if you are about to go fight that person or do whatever similar extreme, now I have to like spend my energy consoling you and calming you down.
Bless
Sorry.
you. You have 2 more.
Sorry, that was a little bit of a sneeze. I think someone is talking about me right now. But it's all good.
You only have 2 of them left, so I just want to put that on the record.
I'm a very talked about
you get
person.
3.
So is that you wrote down what looks to be 6 or 7?
Yep.
Is that all?
So those are all 6 of them.
Yeah.
And I don't know. Just one last thing I want to touch on empathy is that I just can't stress enough that it's connecting to an emotion, not an experience. Like Brené gave an excellent example in the book when she was talking about she was going to miss her daughter, who was a senior, her daughter's last game. She did everything, had an early flight. But the flight got delayed so much that she missed the game, and she was just really upset because this was her last game with her daughter. And the person that was with her, instead of sympathizing and be like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, like that sucks," like the person sat down, held her hand, said, "We're gonna get through this. I know how much this means to you. What can I do?" Just being there in that capacity, and connecting to the experience, because maybe she never missed her daughter's last game, but she could imagine and feel and know how it feels to be disappointed and sad and upset about something that you really were looking forward to, and that what really meant a lot to you. So yeah, I just can't stress that enough. Try to connect to the underlying feeling, and don't focus. You can give some focus to the experience, definitely listen. But if you can connect to that feeling, that is what's going to connect you to that person, which is also going to allow you to be more empathetic.
So how much does this have to do with your own level of emotional literacy? 'Cause that's something that I've been learning about when I read this book, as well as a couple of other books in tandem with this book, is that if you're not very, there is a correlation between people who are able to like clearly and accurately identify emotions and know what they are, to the level of empathy that person can give. Because if you're not a very emotionally illiterate person, and maybe the only few emotions you can express is anger, joy, pleasure, happiness, and sadness, like you might not be able you might not be able to like fully connect with someone. And I'm wondering, so this is an open-ended question as I form these thoughts, I'm wondering if people who don't have maybe a high emotional IQ or emotional literacy can be very empathetic, because there's so many nuances to emotion. Are like for example, when something bad happened to you, do you feel sad, or do you feel guilty about it? Are you ashamed? Like there's a lot of different words, and if you're connecting to slightly to the wrong emotion, it can create misunderstanding. I mean, it has been times where I'm communicating a situation that hurts me, and someone immediately think that I'm angry about it. And it's like, no, I'm not exactly angry. I'm more so disappointed. And they're almost there with the connection, but I feel misunderstood, which results in me having to re-explain the situation to them again, hopefully that they can see that it's not exactly what you think it is. It's more so this. So I guess the opening question would be, how much emotional literacy plays into this, and how does that affect our communication?
That's a good question. I wish you would have wrote about that. Because now that you ask it, I feel like personally, again, we're not experts. Got to put that disclaimer out there. I feel like it plays a big part, because if I don't know, like you said, if you have a small range of emotions, like even the distinction between agitated and frustrated, right? And irritation. If all of those 3 emotions to me mean anger, that's how can I empathize with you? Because I will see your frustration. Maybe you're frustrated over spilled milk. We'll just use spilled milk. Or you're irritated that you have to clean up the spilled milk. And if I receive that as anger, because I can't identify irritation versus agitation versus frustration. I'm gonna be like, why are you angry over spilled milk?
Y-
And you're like, I'm
And
not
that,
angry
yeah.
over spilled milk. I'm just slightly irritated that I have to clean it
Yeah,
up.
and that can cause another argument. Like I learned that emotions are like an iceberg, right? Like, you have the tip, you have like the tip of the iceberg. But if you visualize an iceberg, like majority iceberg is actually under the water. And you speak of
Hmm.
something like anger, and like times when I'm feeling truly angry, and I don't know about me, I don't know about you, but I definitely know about me, and certainly for most people, is that anger is often the secondary emotion. And that oftentimes anger is the result of an emotion that we felt, but sometimes we're not that connected with ourselves and we don't fully understand what emotions are. That we think that we're angry, but really I'm sad and I'm expressing it through anger. Or I feel hurt and I feel disappointed and I'm expressing it with frustration and resentment. So like, this is just something that I'm thinking about myself. What do you think, Paige?
Yeah, I agree. If we don't have one, going back to anger, I was told for the longest time that anger is the secondary emotion to pain.
Yeah,
So whenever I viewed, and I like that you put those other emotions behind it too, because I never really thought of it as like a reaction to sadness or a reaction to something
yeah,
else. Because I always thought anger was the primary emotion for the longest time until someone said, no, anger is usually the secondary emotion, the
right.
pain. And that even knowing that adds a level of empathy, because when you see that people are angry, I'm able to say, hey, this person is probably in
Yeah.
pain. But now that I have, like, I didn't think of it from the perspective of, oh, this person is sad,
Uh,
because sadness is different from pain. So now I have another element to it. That since you just mentioned it to
yeah,
me,
yeah.
and so now I can say, oh, this person might be in pain, or they might be sad, or they might have some other emotion that they can't connect to. So, or they don't have an emotional intelligence to say, I'm connected to this emotion. I'm just going to summarize it as anger and act out in
Yeah,
anger.
so recently I apologized to somebody because I got into an argument with someone, and what they said, I didn't realize it at the time, but what they said really hurt me. And they what they said, it made me mad, and as a result I made the choice to like get angry, and I started to yell back at them, and it turned into kind of a verbal altercation. And like it took me a couple of months to like get to this apology because I didn't think I was wrong. And although I might not be the person that caused the issue from my perspective, I did have a choice in that moment. And my understanding of in that moment was that whatever they said to me made me feel hurt. And then as a result, I guess I started to get angry, and that anger turned into me yelling. And me yelling wasn't like that was also a choice because I guess I felt like I wasn't being heard. So like, when you get angry and you start yelling, people usually yell because they feel like they're not being heard, because, yelling is the worst form of communication. So you're not actually like, you're probably not even saying anything new. You're probably just repeating yourself. And you're also trying to, I guess, reestablish a power dynamic when you yell. So because you're trying to dominate and take over things. And, I'm not consciously doing this because I'm not a sociopath, but I was really,
Are you
I
sure?
might be. I might be. But I guess looking back on it, I was really hurt. And then, the apology was something along the lines of like, I don't agree with what you did. And I think what you did was wrong, but how I received that information and how you were expressing it to me really hurt me. And still, even though I still disagree with what happened. I made the choice in that moment to let my anger get the best of me, and I made the choice to like yell back and engage with you in such a negative manner where I didn't need to do that. If I would have took a moment and if I would have took a deep breath in that moment when that person is saying some very, I guess, upsetting things, and realized that what I'm feeling right now is hurt, and then I can choose that secondary of emotion from that point. If I just take a moment to pause, I felt like I could have done things differently. So even though that person I felt like did me wrong in that moment, I still felt the need to apologize because I made a choice that just wasn't like something that I want to have a part of my values. So call back. I wanted to have a part of my values. So I sent that apology text like, what, that wasn't right of me, and my bad.
When you sent the text, and just for for some more context, when you sent the text, did you open up about the primary versus secondary feeling, like everything that you basically just said, to us viewing and to me here. Did you explain any of that in the
Yeah,
text?
yeah. I mean, I didn't get so technical about it, but I think I would say, long story short, looking back at what you did, and I'm sorry, I'm gathering my thoughts here, so sorry if it's not perfect, but
No, yeah.
like looking back at what you did, I think in that moment, I was just, I think looking back at it, like I was wondering why were my reactions so strong, and I think they just poked the sore spot, like a soft spot, and I think what they said just really hurt me, and it made me internalize, like, yo, okay, if someone can say something to make me that angry, to an extent, I had to take personal accountability because I have to give that person choice. I have to give it's a choice for me to get angry. I give that person permission to make me mad. And also, if what they said was completely invalid, it probably wouldn't affect me. It'd be like if a little kid say I look like Chewbacca. If I don't feel like I look like Chewbacca, I probably wouldn't take too much stock into that. But I guess what they said actually hit a soft spot. And I guess I was questioning internally whether or not that was true. So I immediately got defensive, and that defensiveness turned into attack mode. And then I started to push back as my ultimate form of defense. And, part of me thinks, like, you know what? I can accept feedback from somebody, even if I don't think it's valid, and just understand that that's their opinion, and I don't have to take ownership of it. So I'm not answering the question fully. So let me pull it back. I think in a text message, what I pretty much said that I think I that situation taught me a lot about myself. And although I still disagree, I feel like maybe you touched maybe one of my insecurities. And I think what you said really hurt me. And as a result, instead of like listening to what you had to say, because although I disagreed, and here's the thing, I felt like what they said was maybe it should be respected. And I felt that what they said was should be listened to because that was their emotion and that's how they feel. And I want to honor that emotion because it is to an extent valid in our relationship. So where's my train of thought going here? I want to somehow, I wish looking back on it, I would have recognized what they were saying. But because I got so angry, I cut off what they were actually trying to communicate, and I started focusing on defending myself in the situation. And as a result, it just created like this fiery situation between the both of us. And I didn't do my part in defusing that. So yeah, I just didn't like an apology. Like that's not how I want to operate. That's not how I want to move in life. And although I do feel like I do feel like you maybe slighted me in their assessment during that argument, I didn't need to give you that exact same energy in return.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So in a sense, part of the reason why the argument escalated or that person was able to get pretty much poke at a wound or poke at a soft spot to get you to that point of being angry. And then part of the reason that from that anger the conversation escalated
Yeah.
is because, would you say you had on some armor?
Yeah, for sure, and that's one of the downside because I in that moment I feel like my ego was being attacked, and the ego, we're gonna break down what armor means, but your ego is one of those components of your armor, and if I was just able to put my ego to the side, I can hear what they have to say. So to give a little bit more context, you know, I'm being very vague about the situation. I'm still going to be very vague about the situation. But to give more context, I thought the way they communicated to me, I felt was a little bit disrespectful, and I didn't like that disrespect. And you don't have to tolerate that. And I could have expressed that clearly without getting mad, is what I'm trying to say. So that's part of the reason I wanted to apologize. And although what they said to me, I felt like was a little bit disrespectful, I felt like their emotions were maybe, valid. And from their perspective, they have a point, and that point should be addressed. And maybe in that moment, if I didn't have my armor on, and if I treat this in a very egotistical way, I could have accepted that feedback, expressed, hey, I don't like the way you're talking to me in this instance, but we can still work through this problem together. And then maybe it wouldn't, and then maybe we could have came to a resolution opposed to a falling out happening between me and this person. And then like, we don't talk for like months.
That makes
Yeah.
sense. Yeah, that's unfortunate. It's always unfortunate but it's good learning. It's unfortunate when situations escalate to that point where now there's a loss of time. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And I'm guilty of this too. I feel like a lot of people are probably guilty of that, letting things escalate. Um, and as a result, there's just a lack of communication, or the communication is
Yeah.
non-existent for a period of time. Um, but it's also good learning, because you did say you learned from this incident. You reached out, you apologized, so there are some good things that
Yeah.
happened after the fire like kind of
Yeah.
settled.
And they respected it, in that instance, I guess, I was trying to be the bigger person, not bigger in comparison to them, but, bigger in comparison to me. Like I wanted to, like, I guess, do the right thing, because just because someone else slights me, that doesn't mean that I have to compromise and corrupt my values, and that I can still move with a certain sense of integrity. Because, looking back on it, I don't want to be that person that lets someone gets under my skin like that. And we talk about this armor. I like to think that my past couple of years of my life, I've been slowly dismantling this armor, but I guess I still had a little bit of it on somewhere, because what they said, I guess, really bothered me. And, and you can provide a clear definition, but I'm going to try to give a loose definition of what armor is. I understand you got
Okay.
notes, so I'm going off the top of my head, but from my understanding, this armor, armor is we all go through very traumatic experiences in life. We all go through various senses of pain, despair, trauma, and letdown. And then over time, to like deal with these things, we start assembling this armor. Also, it can be something as little as it can, not little, but something as like simple as fear, but it can control our life. We start assembling this armor, and this armor often manifests itself in perfectionism. It manifests itself in ego, and we feel like we cannot be our authentic self. That's the key to the armor. We put on this mask to, like, I guess, to toughen us up during social interactions, because we feel like if we remove this armor and we be our vulnerable selves, we acknowledge that we're hurt instead of suppressing it, that it would be much more difficult to bear and difficult to deal with. So what this armor does, at least on the surface level, is that we don't acknowledge our emotions. We don't acknowledge our pain, and the armor just absorbs all of it. But it doesn't actually really absorb all of it. What's really happening is that you're probably internalizing it. You're probably bottling it up, and it's probably like being stored so deep inside of you that one day it's going to seep itself out. So, like, I find that, at least for me, the removing of the armor was absolutely necessary, because, to be quite honest, I think I'm stronger without it. And I can acknowledge something without necessarily suppressing it, or just pretend like it doesn't exist.
I want to touch on armor
Yeah.
too. Like, I like that you said, like, it kind of gives you, like, it kind of makes you suppress your feelings, like you think they're being absorbed by the armor,
Hmm.
and things are, you feel like people's words are propelling off of you from the armor, but they're not. um One thing with armor that I personally find not interesting, I don't want to say interesting, but profound about
Yeah.
it, is that while you are blocking, we're going to use quotes, while you are blocking those negative feelings, or you perceive that you're blocking them, you're also blocking love.
Yeah. You are.
like you that's with armor, nothing gets through. So that means the joy, the love. So if you have armor on, for instance, and Terrance, you can let me know if you've experienced this before, but, like, for instance, let's say joy.
Yeah.
You know, you because you have this armor on, it's hard to feel joy. So for a split second, maybe for 5.2 or maybe 2.1 seconds,
Hmm.
to get precise, maybe for like 2.1 seconds, you're like, this thing happened and I am excited and I'm joyful. But then immediately, because you are wearing so much armor, you wipe that joy away. You start thinking about all the bad things that can happen,
So,
so that way you don't get to fully realize your joy. And that's because you have the armor
so
on. So while it's all, okay.
sorry, let me just add to it. When we feel joy, it comes from a place of incredible vulnerability, is what the book says. because joy is this very fragile yet beautiful thing. Like you feel what's it called? You feel deeply grateful for what happened, but at the same time, it's like this piece of glass that's just sitting at the edge of a desk. At least you feel like that, and that can be easily knocked down. So you immediately just start assembling the armor, and you immediately try to, I guess, avoid having joy because you feel like it can be taken away. And
Yep.
that's going to a topic of fear that we're going to touch on slightly a bit later. But let's keep talking about joy. Take it away.
Yeah. I want to backtrack a
Yeah.
bit about the armor. So while it's blocking out these negative feelings, like I said, it's also blocking out things like love and joy. There's a concept in the book that's called strong back, soft
Yeah.
front. Strong back is having the, and this goes back to big too, like having the boundaries, the integrity, the generosity, blah 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 blah. So like the strong back is what makes you stand tall, which has you, that gives you the power to fight in the arena, because you're not going in there empty handed. People think that because they have this armor on that they can go to the arena and tough it out, but the armor is really just slowing you
Yeah.
down. It's preventing you from getting to the root cause. It's preventing you to be vulnerable. So when you have this strong back and you're able to stand tall, then you're also able to start taking off that armor, because you're like, yo, going back to the, call back to values. You're like, hey, if my value is to be empathetic, that means I'm going to take the armor off and be empathetic.
Yeah.
If it means having integrity, that means I'm going to take the armor off and have integrity. If it means being curious and understanding, I'm going to take that armor off so I can be curious and understanding. Because when you got the armor on, you are not going to be able to let your values shine through.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you're absolutely right. Even as you talk, I think about like some of my relationships that I've been in, whether it's like, with my family, friends, coworkers, or even like, partners. Like, I guess like, when you have felt like you've been hurt for so long, you start to put on that armor. And like, have you ever noticed that maybe this is for me, but if I've been like, I guess, hurt by someone for so long, I stopped kind of acting like myself around them in a way. And then like I start to I treat them like Terrance would treat them, but I treat them like a much more hollowed out version and a much more colder version of Terrance, because I don't want to put myself in the position of being hurt again. Because sometimes I often wonder, I'm like, man, I knew this person for like 10 years and I treat this person like with almost like so much contentment. And then like I would meet someone new and who don't have that residual baggage, and then I treat them much more warm, much more friendly, and much more loving. And I was like really struggling, like, which version is the true me? Is this how I truly treat people after 10 years? Is that true? Or am I putting on the front and the opposite end? Like when I meet this new person, like I'm just being like fake nice. As I got older, I just started to realize that maybe I just have like some sort of like resentment towards them that prevent myself from like really shining through. And whenever I'm around them, I have to put up this mask because I don't want whatever triggered me to put on the mask in the first place to like, hurt me again. And I don't like that because it makes me feel like a dollar version of myself. And I feel like that energy, even after that interaction, like sticks with me and it affects me. I much rather be myself everywhere I can go, because, after you accept and you love yourself, you realize that you can stand on your own without having this armor, without having this mask, and that you can treat people, the way you can treat people based off your own values without compromising. It's not to say you should be a pushover or anything like that, but you don't have to compromise on your values, even in the most intense situations. You just don't. Excuse me.
Yeah. So when you're in that situation where you have, two different friendships, one that's more long term, one that's, fresher or
Yeah.
newer, and you notice that, hey, I have like this person is getting a more full life Terrance versus a hollowed out Terrance version of
Yeah.
yourself. Like, and you might not have the answer to this, to be fair. Like, have you navigated that yet? Like, have you come to a place where you're comfortable being both versions, or are you still in a place where you're like, I don't know. And like, if you decide, hey, this more fuller life version of Terrance is me, what does that mean for a hollowed out relationship?
I don't know how to balance it out, because again, like, do you want to give a part of yourself to somebody that is just going to just, like, I guess, take it for granted or let you down? Like, you know, because, you know, you don't, like, it is a delicate balance between, like, you know, being your authentic self, especially if your authentic self is being generous, and then just letting someone just abuse that generosity. So you have to, like, know where is the boundary and what the line is. I will say the hollowed out version of me, it comes as a result of, it does come from conditioning over time, but also comes from, like, maybe I didn't truly forgive this person for what they did. So therefore I don't want to risk being nice to them again, or being, like, you know, extremely kind to them again. And, it makes me feel bad, because, I have to work on that. And, like, you know, different relationships that work will require a different amount of effort. If it's a colleague of mine, maybe it might be easier because we might not have that strong of a connection on a personal level. If it's a family member of mine, it might be a whole lot more difficult, because, you know, oftentimes we grow up with brothers and sisters and siblings and aunts and aunties and uncles. It's a very messy history. It's a very messy history of ups and downs. We hurt each other when we weren't, you know, perfect people, and we're not perfect people now, but maybe this person slighted me when I was 13 years old, and I still see that 13-year-old version in them 10 years later. And yeah, maybe I just can't get over it. So a lot of it, you know, a lot of it is probably like learning to let go. And if I can let go, then I can, like, I guess, remove that armor. So I don't know, Paige, what do you think? What about your situations in life?
Well, before we get to my situation,
Okay.
I have one more follow-up question.
Yeah.
So, call back to Big with the generosity piece. Do you think that with relationships where, you know, there has been, like, a history of pain and you're working towards forgiveness, do you think looking back at those situations with the lens of, in this particular moment in time, this person was doing the best that they could with the tools that they had, do you think that would help towards forgiving?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Another thing is just, yeah, absolutely. Another thing is just not taking it personal. And when you don't take it personally, you're able to see, like, maybe this person's doing the best that they can. And, like, in that philosophy of doing the best that they can, it's not what you think is what's best for them. And it's not what you think is their, what should be their expectation of what's best. Even if that person purposely let you down, kind of from a perspective, that's the best that they can, because that's just in their own decision making, that they're going to be this a-hole of a person. They're going to be the asshole of this person. They can't even overcome that internally, so they're just passing this energy off to you. When you don't take things personally, I think it does help you move on, because you start to realize that the world doesn't revolve around you, that so many people's, like, life choices and decisions and the way they treat people have everything to do with their past and their own personal life experiences and their own values and their own perspectives and positions in life, that if you take ownership of it, it becomes like a poison to you. And you start to think that, like, you know, they're purposely trying to inflict damage on you. When I am the best version of myself and I'm able to, I guess, get over some of the things that people done, I think it helps me to forgive them more. As a result, it helps me to, like, take the armor off and be my authentic self again whenever I'm around them.
That makes sense. Yeah, if you can't forgive someone, I like to say, in order to take the armor off, you have to have, like, a safe space. And unfortunately, there's not always a safe space. And if you're in a space with someone, or you're sharing a space where that person has repeatedly hurt you and you haven't forgiven them yet, it's kind of like, how can you really expect that armor to come off until that forgiveness happens? So I definitely agree from that perspective.
It's difficult. Like, you know, no one is saying you should take the armor off and just, like, you just walk towards a punch. Like, no one is saying, like, you should put yourself in harm's way.
Yeah.
So
you gotta block.
Yeah.
You know, gotta block.
So a lot of these things work in tandem. You can take that armor off, but also reestablish what boundaries means. Because if you know someone is going to betray your trust or break some sort of commitment, you don't have to put yourself in that position again. But at the same time, you can do it while still being yourself instead of just like, putting on the act. Because that's really what it is. I mean, deep down inside, we all put on this armor because we're afraid. I mean, think about it. If you think about a warrior or a soldier literally putting on armor, why are they doing that? They're trying to protect something. And why they feel like they need to protect it? Because they're afraid that it can be hurt. So in many ways, when you say, hey, I'm going to let my ego take the driver's seat. I'm gonna mask up, put on this armor, and I am going to just be like this inauthentic version of myself. What you're really expressing is a deep-rooted sense of fear. And what I learned in life, especially in my early 20s, is that you don't want to do that. Fear can be so deep-rooted that you don't even know that you're operating in fear sometimes. I look back at a lot of my life decisions and I wonder, because I had the armor on at the time, I wonder, was I doing so many choices? Was I doing so many things and made so many choices out of fear? Because you have to think, like, I grew up in the hood. That's another reason to have on the armor. I had a bit of a dysfunctional family. That's another reason to have it on. Like, I'm from a place where, and this is crazy looking back on it, where you couldn't even have joy. It talks about vulnerability. Like when you're growing up in the streets of Cleveland and someone sees you walking down the street and you're smiling and you have something to be happy about, what's the first thing that they do when they see you going towards a bus stop on your way to school? They try to see, yo, why you smiling? They try to check you. They try to see like, yo, how come you're not experiencing pain? And they try to take it away from you in that moment. They try to jump you. They try to rob you. They try to tell you that you're not from here. They try to give any reason to remove that from you. So as a result, it's actually like a positive reinforcement loop. If you no longer have joy, then they kind of accept you. And then as a result, not having joy, you have to pull on the armor. Now I got to walk around mad because he's mad and he wants me to be mad. And the only way I can navigate through this life is just by having this armor, having this mask on. And it kind of just dogs you out over time. And then after a while, I feel like you lose who you are. So when I think about that, and then I think about the many other experiences that I have, I start to realize I started to piece by piece assemble this armor. And then I start questioning my life decisions. Like, have I made many of my life decisions based off of a deep-rooted sense of fear and a deep-rooted in the lack of self-love? I'm jumping the gun in the conversation here, but I'm gonna leave it at that for now.
No, let's talk about it.
Well, if I can continue, wherever fear is at, self-love isn't, because I've been doing some reading about this, and I think we as humans, for some other reason, we just crave attention. As a baby, our parents, it's like a reward system. We do good, we get rewarded. We do bad, we get punished. It's almost like domestication in a way, like how you domesticate an animal. And many times that reward can just be an attention from your parents. And then we start to crave that. We start to seek attention because we think that's what love is. Like, hey, someone is going to validate me. So, again, growing up in the hood taught me that materialism was the most important thing. So instead of me having self-love and realizing to start from the inside, I have to buy the newest shoes to be accepted and get the attention of my peers. When it comes to hanging out with other dudes, especially in my teenage years, instead of me having love for myself and and having confidence in myself, if I want to get validated by my homies, I will only receive their validation and their attention if I got girls, if I can get girls. You all know the story of a teenage boy trying to get laid and stuff like that. And so much of that, so much of the reasons why we do that is because we don't really love ourselves. So let me take these Nike shoes and place them in this hole in my heart. Let me try to talk to all these girls and then break their heart, because that's what men's supposed to do at this age, because and let me fill that hole in my heart, because what I'm really looking for is acceptance. School told me that 100%, you have to get 100% to get an A+, and that is a form of perfectionism. Now, for me to get accepted by my teachers, let me strive to make them happy by meeting this standard. And if I don't meet it by 5%, 10%, 20%, I should feel 20% bad about it and then 70% happy about it. And let me work as hard as I can to get their acceptance and fill that hole in my heart. Let me accumulate money. Let me accumulate status. Let me accumulate, good, pats on the backs from my bosses at work. And then after a while, we're just filling up this fucking hole in our heart instead of actually having the love for ourselves, because deep down inside, we're doing all of these things because we're afraid that we might not be worthy of love. So we because we're afraid, we start to make all these different decisions instead of realizing that, you know, it all starts and ends from the inside. And sometimes I wonder, would I have been a different person if maybe I didn't care so much about materialism at a young age, if I wasn't trying to chase girls to, like, you know, big up my ego as a man at such a young age, or, you know, just various different things, like various. If I'm going on a tangent, please stop me, Paige. But that's where it
No,
ends.
you're
Yeah.
good. I was interested. I'm like, keep going.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I love the bit about having like this hole in your heart that's, instead of filling it with self-worthiness and self-love, it's being filled with a lot of these material things. Material as in money, material as in the amount of people that like
Yeah.
you to boost your ego, material from the perspective of, well, I think that's all that for the material part.
Mm-hmm.
But like, if you have this hole, which could be created by multiple different things, whether that fear was instilled to you by your parents, your teachers, your peers, I think people significantly underestimate the power of peers.
Yeah. That's why I call it domestication. I mean, think about it. Like, babies are happy, babies are joyful, babies are incredibly vulnerable by nature. But what happens? Like, you know, society, your parents, your school teachers, your peers, they all start instilling this thing in you, like who you should be. They start establishing expectations and goals that you should meet, and it becomes a positive reinforcement loop. If you meet our expectations, we will show you love. If you bring girls to the parties and you prove to me that you can get girls, we'll respect you. If you got on the nicest shoes, you're cool. Like it's like we're being domesticated over time. And we're, in many ways, it is a positive and negative reinforcement loop that we're just playing into. Sorry. Yeah.
How do you propose, I guess? How do you propose breaking that loop?
Well, recognition is probably the first thing. Like recognizing, like, yo, I am being strung along here. And I'm being strung along from like, and you have to like really start to dive in deep, is what I've been doing when I read all of these books, not just Brené's Brown book, but other books. Like, okay, I'm being strung along here because I moved to Japan. I graduated college. All of these things have been the pinnacle of what success looks like to me. And I wanted to reach these goals. I thought if I can hit these goals, I'll be more happy, but I wasn't happy. I thought if I buy these shoes, like, you know, these people will accept me more. I thought if I get these girls, if I pick up this girl at the club, like, you know, my homies would big me up more. And then like, it just, again, it's a hole. Like you can put as much as you want inside of there, but you will never actually feel satisfied. So how do we break this loop? It's starting to recognize, like, hey, maybe this problem here is like a deeper sense of like of a lack of self-love, because you wouldn't be operating in these notions in many of these different ways if you didn't have that hole in your heart. And again, like where self-love isn't, oftentimes fear is taking its place. So to break the loop, I don't know. I think it's maybe just recognizing what's going on. What do you think?
Yeah, I think if you don't have self-awareness is the first step. And that's the first step in emotional intelligence, period.
Yeah.
You have to have self-awareness. So if you're not aware that you are unhappy, and then if you're not aware, if you don't ask yourself why you're unhappy, and then really ask yourself why, not a shallow level why, like ask yourself why like five times, go 5 layers deep. You're like, okay, I'm not happy. Why? Because of XYZ. You know, maybe you say I'm not happy. Why? Because I don't make them enough money. Okay, why does not making enough money make you not happy? Because I want the newest Jordans and I can't
Right.
afford them. Okay, why do you want the newest
Right.
Jordans?
That's important. Because like how many people you knew in high school and in college chose a specific major because they're gonna make more money, and you have to ask yourself, okay,
Too many.
we're going down the emotional ladder, or now we're about to dig through the iceberg. Why do you want to make more money? They want you to start unraveling that so I can have status, so I can show people that I'm worthy of something. Because in society, we base people's self-worth quite literally. This is the concept of capitalism. Like your life has a price tag on it if you die with life insurance. It's like your self-worth is determined based on how much material goods you have access to. And we're kind of taught that at a very young age. So why do you want to get this job? Why do you want to make more money? You start, okay, so I can buy these nice things. I have a good life. Okay, using money for experiences is great. No one's gonna take that away from you. But why do you need a Chanel bag? Why do you need these new Nike shoes? Like, why do you need these Jordans? Why do you need to be so fresh all the time? Like, do you not feel like if you don't have these things that people won't accept you? Because once you start asking that question, you start to realize that, okay, well, maybe I'm a little bit self-conscious. And then once you get the level, like,
Yep.
okay, you're self-conscious now. So let's dive in. Just
Why are you self-conscious?
exactly. Why are you self-conscious? Like, what made you that way? Well, my mother always told me that when I go to church, we have to, dress in our Sunday's best. Like, that's just like one example. Or because, I used to be made fun of when I was a kid when I had those Payless shoes on. Just to keep it real. Like, when I was in, man, I remember that happened to me. Like, when I was like 9 years old, I had these Payless shoes, these $15 shoes. And my mother probably worked really, really hard to put these on my feet. I walked outside and I got roasted. A month later, I pressured my mom to take me to the store. I forgot what store, Value City. I don't know at the time. And I got these Nikes. And then like, these clean white Nikes. I walked outside and then I got those shoes look hard. I got that pat on the back from my peers and I felt good. And then like, that probably is what started a cycle of me trying to like, just be fresh, because I'm self-conscious. So we reached the point of, okay, I figured out that I'm self-conscious. And then you start to dive in a little bit deeper, and then maybe you might make the connection that I want acceptance. Like, the reason why I feel self-conscious is because I feel like I'm not being accepted. And then once you hit the level of acceptance, you start to say, well, why do you need acceptance? Why can't that validation start and end with inside of you? And then you only got really one answer. It's like, well, maybe I don't fully love myself. Like, you probably just get to that point, and then you start to think like, damn, if love wasn't here this entire time, what the hell was? Fear. I was afraid my peers wouldn't like me if I didn't have the nice shoes. So I became self-conscious. Growing up, I was afraid that if I choose the major that I really wanted to make me happy, I wouldn't make enough money. I would feel small in society. So let me do something to make me happy, because I'm afraid to be ridiculed, or I'm afraid to chase my dreams. So let me pick something safe, because if I fell in front of people, maybe people would think that I'm lesser, think that I'm stupid. And as a result, they don't love me. It's like you start to piece that shit together. And that's what I've been doing. I'm like, damn. Have I been like, I was like, yo, and I think I'm in a pretty comfortable position in life. But when you start to see like, yo, all of these things are around me and they can pull me, it's hard for me not to say that my life wasn't influenced by this. Even now that I'm looking back at it retrospectively, I can't fully confirm that I wasn't influenced. I know I was, but I don't know to what extent. I'm like, yo, I know I haven't been myself because I haven't like fully loved myself, because I've been trying to like, replace that self-love with all these other things. So maybe me and my life decisions that I've been making is fear-based. And that's why I've been thrown for a loop for these past couple of years, and particularly these past couple of months.
I want to touch on some fear because I got a journal, and funny enough, so to give everybody some background, Terrance and I were talking about reading some journal pieces or elaborating, maybe not reading verbatim, but talking about some journal pieces, because we both journal. So my journal, it has like different journeys, and on this particular journey, this was not on purpose, by the way. The first topic was fear. I just want to throw that out there. And I want to touch on, because you just touched on like the fear of failure. That is my number one fear. So the question is, write about your top 5 fears and how long you've had them. What effect do they have on your daily life? So fear, or the fear of failure. So I had this for as long as I can remember. I can't even, some of these have actual dates. This one in particular, like, it's been so long, I have no idea where this began. I have to do a little bit searching there. And it affects my life because it holds me back and prevents me from trying new things. For example, and then I don't know if I told you about this prior to this, Terrance. I might have. I had an opportunity to make a job move, a job change. Same company, just different role, right?
Yeah.
And this had been stressing me out for like literal weeks because I was like, I have no idea what I'm going to do. I really love what I'm doing now. Do I really want to make a change? And to give some more perspective, I had multiple options laid out in front of me. Okay. And me being the person that I am, I'm indecisive, and I'm indecisive because of the fear of failure, because I don't want to make the wrong decision, what makes me make no
Yeah.
decision, or the decision of least
Uh-huh.
resistance. And so I'm asking for people's opinions, like should I make this job change? Should I make this jump or not? And I get to the point where one of my friends, shout out to you, friend, if you're watching this, you'll know who you are. I had a conversation with him, and he said, Paige, don't you really want to do security? And I said, yeah. And he's like, okay, does any of these jobs like give you that the opportunity? Because I've been studying to take this CISSP exam, which is a really tough exam in the security space, but it really puts you
Cybersecurity.
ahead when it comes. Yeah, cyber. Well, so this one is the Certificate of Information
Yeah.
Systems, or Security for
Yeah.
Information
Not
Systems.
not not at
And
Walmart. Just to make it clear. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
and
Just to be clear.
you
Yeah.
know, yes, cybersecurity.
Yeah.
Okay, I see what you. Yeah, okay, I see what you meant.
Yeah.
But yes, for like cybersecurity, like penetration testing, threat modeling, risk analysis, etc. And I've been studying for this exam for a really long time. Not a really long time. It's been like a few months. Okay, I lied. A year. So I've been studying for this exam for a year. It's over 1,000 pages of just technical vomit. So it's a lot to. You have to read every page and really know your shit. Excuse my
It's
French.
cool.
But that being said, he was like, Paige, don't you really want to do security? And I was like, yeah, I really want to do security. Like I'm reading this book, I'm getting prepared for this exam. Like I really want to do this. And he said, does any of these roles give you, or do any of these roles give you the opportunity to do security? I'm like, yes, all of them do. And he said, to what level? And I was like, well, kind of, sort of. Like, it's not going to be my main job, but it's going to play a role in my job. And he said, Paige, you're at a company that is one of the biggest leaders in security. And there's plenty of people there and plenty of teams that you can get fully connected, where security isn't your part-time job, it's your full-time job. And if you're really serious about this, you need to find a role that you're doing security 90% of the time and not like 20% of the time.
Okay.
And I said, okay, you're right. And he said, it might be scary. He's like, it will be challenging. You will not know a lot of things because this is going to be, you're going to be around a lot of smart people. And he said, it will be scary. But if you're really serious, this is something that you should do. And I sat on that. And in that, I realized the reason why I haven't taken the exam yet, I've been procrastinating. I feel like I'm prepared, but I've been procrastinating for like 6 months to take it. I was prepared 6 months ago. The reason why I haven't taken the exam, the reason why I'm considering roles that are like 70%, or even not even 70, 50% security and not 90% security, is because I am scared.
Yeah.
And I am scared of failing.
Okay.
Because this is going to be it's going to be a new space for me, and I am going to be early career in the security field. Even though I really like security, I'm scared to make that jump, because if I fail at something that I really like, that's going to feel really shitty.
Okay.
And in that, I decided that none of these roles were right for me, and that if I am serious, I need to look at that failure, or not that failure, look at that fear of failure in the eye and make that jump.
So now that you are aware of this, do you want to talk about what you're going to do next? So you have that self-awareness that, okay, maybe I'm a little bit nervous. To be quite frank, I'm a little bit afraid of like taking on this role because I feel like I may not succeed. What are you going to do now?
Yeah. So to be honest, so right now, I recently, 2 or 3 days ago, maybe 4 days ago, I emailed the person that reached out to me and told them that I wasn't going to accept this other role.
Yeah.
which wasn't the security-based role. And also recently, a couple days ago, I believe it was Christmas Day, no, it was Christmas Eve. I have like we have an internal, like a Facebook chat
Yeah.
that a lot of the internal employees use. And I just posed the question like, hey, I'm interested in security. Tell me about your job. And I listed a lot of questions, and people have been like reaching out. They've like, messaged me on Teams, send me an email, like put an invite on my calendar. Let's talk about it. And that's going to be my step. Step one was me declining the position that was only partially security and not fully security. Step two was reaching out and being vulnerable and letting people know, like, I don't know exactly what I want to do in security, but I really know that I like this space, because who would read a 1,000 plus page like technical garbage book that's just technical vomit if you don't like it? Who would spend months studying if they didn't like it? And the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to have to just bite that bullet and just schedule that exam and stop procrastinating. So my goal is to, by the end of this month, so in the next like 5 days or so, go ahead and schedule the exam for sometime in February and just bite the bullet. It's a $700 bullet, but I'm going to bite it.
Well, first and foremost, thank you for sharing that. Like that was really strong of you for sharing. That's first, I hope you pass the exam. I'm glad that you are you're back on path. We spoke earlier in this podcast about the masking and the emotional armor. And I am being presumptuous in saying this, but part of me feels like if you didn't take off that emotional armor to realize what was happening, that maybe you wouldn't have done that. Do you think that's the case?
100%. Because I had on that armor, I was avoiding the realization that I'm fearful of this. Mm-hmm. And I even took this vulnerability a step further. I reached out to the person when I declined the position. I also told them that I am open to having a conversation as to why.
Yeah.
And I plan to be completely transparent and vulnerable and say, hey, I need a role. I've been scared to make this move. And I need a role that gives me 90% of the time, like 90% of my job is security. And this is like, I love the team that I'm working with. I love the people that I'm working with. But because of this, like this need that I have, because I haven't been completely transparent and vulnerable about my needs. And I think that's what also put me in the position to get these offers that don't really align up with my inner career trajectory, because I haven't been vulnerable with the people around me to let them really know my needs.
Yeah.
And part of that was because I had the armor on, because I wasn't even fully aware of my needs, because I was too scared to realize what my needs actually were. So yes, 100%.
So I'm imagining like the moment you start, well, first off, when you talk to these people, like they're probably more receptive of what you're saying than you expected. Like those people are very generous. I'm sure your manager was very helpful in these instances. And the moment you stop being afraid, like it stopped tainting your reality and realize that people are there to help you, and that, you have this support system that, that sticks around you and that want to see you succeed. Yeah. Thank you for sharing. We actually skipped around a bit, man. We covered fear. We covered self-love. We covered ego. You wanna transition to the next topic? You wanna talk more about this?
Yeah.
Go
ahead.
So the next topic, and I'm gonna let you take this away because this is more your topic than my topic. Maybe I might have some insights to share, but let me prep you up. The next topic is guilty, shame, humiliation, and embarrassment. Would you like to talk about those concepts? You have them all listed on one line, so I don't know if these are all separate concepts or you're gonna talk about them in tandem. So take it away.
Oh, together. Yeah. So I completely forgot about this section. So thank you for for bringing it back up. So first, I think it's important to set the tone of what these feelings are, because a lot of the times, even I lump these four feelings together when there are four distinct feelings. Guilt is like, I did something bad. You feel guilty about doing something. Shame is, because I did that thing, I am internally bad. I am inherently bad. That's no more that's no longer looking at your actions and having some level of discomfort with your actions, but now this is having discomfort within yourself about yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You feel shame. Humiliation is more so that person did something bad to me, and now I feel a level of discomfort. Um, and I didn't deserve it. That's the key part. This person did something bad to me that caused me to feel a level of discomfort that I didn't deserve. And then you have embarrassment, which is more so I did something silly. I feel some discomfort, but I know others have done this as well. And I will overcome
Yeah.
this. Like I'm just gonna briefly feel this, and then I'm going to let it go. I'm not going to linger on it. Whereas with the other ones, you kind of you can get in the cycle of kind of lingering on them. Whereas embarrassment, you kind of it's like a fleeting
So
feeling. Mhm.
embarrassment feels like it's okay to have because it's funny. You're gonna probably laugh about it. It's not that big of a
Yeah.
deal. Yeah, these I'm still gonna let you take the floor because I don't really
Yeah,
know
go for
much
it.
about it. But one thing I know about these emotions in particular, because we're all acquainted with them, is that guilty, shame, and humiliation. Like when we feel like we made a mistake and we did something wrong, we may experience one of these three. We tend to punish ourselves. Like, and what's weird about the human brain that doesn't work like anything else in society. If you commit a crime in society, you're punished once. You commit a crime, you get caught, you go to court, you go to jail. But these emotions, guilty, shame, and humiliation, they punish you for months, days. Like you do something wrong, it
Yes.
re-punishes you. You think about it again, you harbor on these things over and over and over again. And that's what's interesting about, what many of our brains work when we have that inner critic, where we have that lack of self-love. And when that ego exists, is that when you do something wrong, punishment doesn't occur once like it does if you get sentenced to court and you do your time. It occurs over and over and over again until you learn to let it go. Take it away.
Yeah, but and the unfortunate part is sometimes people don't
Yeah.
let it go. Some people are stuck feeling that guilt, that shame, or that humiliation where they don't move forward from it, and then it impacts other areas of their lives. And going back to the concept of armor, it just adds another layer to it. If you inherently feel like you are shameful, or if you're filled with shame, that means you no long that adds that layer of an armor on where you feel like I am not worthy of X, Y, and Z, therefore I'm not going to be receptive to it.
Mm-hmm.
If you feel guilt, you're like, hey, put a layer of armor on. I feel bad about something that I did. And I want to backtrack because even with guilt, sometimes guilt you end up correcting it. I think shame is much deeper than
Yeah.
guilt. Guilt, you feel bad about something that you did. And a lot of the times when people feel bad about something that they did, they will go and do another action to try to
Yeah.
correct it and an attempts to correct it. Whereas with shame, if you inherently feel bad about yourself, sometimes that can be debilitating where you don't even want to look at ways to feel better about yourself because you don't feel like you're worthy of feeling better.
I think for me, sometimes I feel guilty. Whatever I did just replays in my head for days on end. That shit is fucking annoying. I gotta be honest, man. It's just like sometimes you gotta learn when to let it go and learn to like just move on. Just keep it moving. Like people make mistakes and you just gotta learn to let it go. As far as shame, man, like part of the reason I was looking at the show notes, that's why I took that pause, is that the author had a really brilliant definition of what shame is that I was trying to like pick up on, because she started to talk about,
Mm-hmm.
like she said, like the lack of shame, and like like she was like saying like world leaders, like when we use phrases like how can they be so shameless, and like she was
Oh
flipping
yeah.
it. She was like, actually that's the presence of shame and we're just using it in an inverse perspective. So that's why I'm looking at the show notes, I'm like, man, I would really love to read the definition of what Brené Brown says about shame, because in a way she described it in a way that I haven't never thought of it before. So I can't find the notes. Do you have the notes on that?
I don't, but if I can remember, since shame puts on a deep level of armor, you can have. So I like to, when she talks about armor, I like to think of it as having layers.
Yeah.
And I feel like shame is the thickest of armors. And when we look at world leaders or people who are like celebrities and in the limelight, or even just your family and friends, if they inherently feel shame, they have one of the thickest layers of armor on that they can
Mm-hmm.
have. And as we discussed earlier, when you have on these thick layer, like this thick layer of armor, it becomes really hard to be vulnerable. And that lack of vulnerability means that you're not fully expressing yourself, nor are you receiving what other people are expressing. And that's how people, like, so when we say people are acting shameless, they're not really acting shameless. They have on so much armor and carrying around so much armor, whether that's, they feel pain plus shame, like that they are actually projecting outward those negative feelings. And they have the deepest level of shame, which is why they're acting out that way.
So
Because if you are a person that doesn't have shame, it's more easy to take that armor off.
here's an excerpt from the book. I'm reading this verbatim. I was trying to find it. So if I
Yeah.
can't connect to this smoothly as possible, listeners and Paige, please understand. But summary it directly. If you want to see the ego go into DEFCON 1, get anywhere close to shame. What makes embracing vulnerability feel like the most terrifying thing is how taking off the armor and exposing our hearts can open us up to experiencing shame. Our egos are willing to keep our heart encased in armor no matter the cost. If we can avoid feeling less than or unworthy of love and belonging, if we can avoid feeling less than and unworthy of love and belonging, what the ego doesn't understand is that stunting our emotional growth and shutting down our vulnerability doesn't protect us from shame, disconnection, and isolation. It guarantees them. And then she says, let's take a look at how shame work and how we can survive, how we need to use a healthy dose of empathy to survive. So I wanted to share that bit of a quote. I was like, it's really tiny, so I'm trying to read it. But I hope that provides like a little bit of insight. If I can read just one more paragraph, this might be a little bit disjointed because I am reading this fresh. So here's the quote. First, shame is the fear of disconnection. As we talked about in myths of vulnerability, we are physically, emotionally, cognitively, and spiritually hardwired for connection, love, and belonging. Connection, along with love and belonging, is why we're here. It is what gives us purpose and meaning to our lives. Shame is the fear of disconnection. It's the fear that something that we've done or failed to do, an ideal that we are not living up to, or a goal that we're not going to accomplish, make us unworthy of connection.
That makes a lot of
Yeah.
sense. And I think later on in the passage or in that chapter, she talks about how empathy is like the arch nemesis of
Yeah.
shame. I know you briefly mentioned it, like in order to combat shame, you need
Yeah.
empathy, but to really drive it home, like they're arch nemesis.
Yeah.
So if you're feeling any, because I think part of getting out of shame, so to give some perspective, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but there was a period in my life where I was filled with just immense shame. Um, like it was crippling to some degree. And one way that I got over that feeling, and there was a series of events that happened that led to that feeling. It wasn't just like I was just out here, and some people are just out here feeling shame, but I wasn't just out here feeling shame. I There was a series of events that brought about that deep negative feeling, and I carried that with me for literal years. Um, and it took me having compassion. And I think sometimes compassion and empathy can be synonymous with one another. But it took me having immense compassion for myself and empathy for myself to look back at certain situations and say, again, with that generosity theme, I did the best that I could with the tools that I had. And for me, that empathy and compassion and learning to have empathy and compassion for myself erase the shame, where today I don't feel that shame that I once felt,
Yeah.
which I had held on to for for literal years.
You know, we all experience that. And, you know, I totally understand what that feeling feels like. We all done something that, you know, that doesn't maybe necessarily align with our values or even values that's placed on us. That's sometimes often where shame lies, especially if you grew up in a very conservative family. And then we just kind of feel less than, and we don't know, we grapple with the idea of showing ourselves self-love and compassion in those instances, because we need to go into this mode of punishing ourselves. This is why I sometimes think, like, are we being domesticated? I mean, even the broader conversation, sometimes I wonder, should you even spank your kids for this very reason? Because it's like you kind of
No.
introduce that, like you kind of like introduce this idea of, like, you know, part of the reason of becoming an adult, when you're a kid, your parents shame you, your parents, society shames you, tell you what's right and what's wrong. But part of becoming an adult is that they no longer need to do it because you do it to yourself. And
Mm-hmm.
because we've been so conditioned at a young age to embrace this feeling, and we've been taught this feeling, that we kind of become too hard on ourselves. So, you know, I want to say that I understand where you're coming from, Paige. I might not experience what you experienced, but, you know, we all experience shame.
I also want to add a caveat to it. Because while you can experience shame because of something you did, sometimes shame is placed on other
Yeah.
people. For me, for this particular incident, I felt like the shame was placed on me by other people, and because of other, not necessarily for something that I did, but because there was a lack of
Mm.
understanding. And sometimes if like if there's a lack of understanding with the people that you're close with, that can be a level of, you can end up feeling a level of
Yeah.
shame.
Oh, she talked about
Like
that.
we can even,
Like she when she said that when she did that value exercise with one of her colleagues, and like I think
mhm.
the topic of the book was like he's just conservative with money in general. He's not a very risky person, and like she realized that maybe he wasn't trying to purposely mistreat her that way, and what's it called, that maybe it's, you know, maybe she should understand where he's coming from and stuff. Sorry, maybe
Oh
yeah,
no,
maybe that's similar to what you're talking about.
no, no.
I'm off. Yeah,
Yes
sorry,
and
I'm
no.
off.
That, that,
Forgive
that
me. I'm bullshitting. Like, I'm making shit up right now.
No, no,
Yeah.
you're fine. No, but like more so like let's look at, I'm trying to like find a good example. I can't think of one without like giving my own example, which I don't want to give. So, but I think some people will understand that shame can be placed on you, not for necessarily something that you did,
Mm.
but for, oh, I can use an example, a recent example that I talked to you and Carlos about.
Uh,
Not so recent. And I won't drop any names and I won't drop too much, but like I remember the conversation you and I had. I went out and met a friend, we'll say a friend.
yeah, I know this. I know this
And
story.
yeah, the friend totally misread like the tone and the situation. We were just going to catch up and get some coffee, and the friend, new friend by the way, um, totally misread the situation, and thought that me simply getting coffee to try to broaden my network was a date, which it was not. Even so, in that moment, like I remember talking to you and Carlos about it, like the first thing that I felt was pretty much shame, like, oh my gosh, like this person did this, and I cannot believe that I allowed myself to be in this position, whereas in reality I didn't do anything wrong. In reality, the shame that I felt was placed on me from society, and from society and previous experience and stuff like that. So there are instances where, you know, you can be doing something out of the kindness of your heart, and that can get misconstrued by another person, and their actions can make you feel
Talk
shame.
talk
You get what I'm
talk more
saying?
about that. Like not to say you should reveal more details. When I say talk more about that, like I'm very interested into, like, you know, hearing more about what you thought during those moments, and, you know, in retrospect, what you should have thought in those moments, and how you treated yourself during this interaction.
Yeah. So in the moment, my whole thing was like, OMG, 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 WTF, WTF, WTF. And then it transpired into like, what did I do wrong? That was like the first like real question that I asked myself. And I think I even verbalized it. It was like, what did I do wrong? Trying to understand what did I do in this
Yeah.
situation? And good advice from you and Carlos. Shout out to you guys. You guys are like, that's pretty effed up. That's what you're thinking. Not in a not in like a demeaning way or a
Damn.
belittling way, but
Yeah.
it was more like, yo, like you didn't do anything wrong, and it's pretty effed up that you feel like you did, because we understand that you feel that way because of society, type of
Yeah.
thing. And that really helped me in that moment, because I was about to go down a spiraling, like, just spiraling into
Yeah.
shame, where it wasn't really on me, it was on that other person. And I even reached out to that person after the situation to tell them, like, hey, like, what you did made me feel very uncomfortable. I didn't appreciate it. Um, and that just solidified, after talking to you guys, it made me realize that I shouldn't feel shame. So I was able to more easily let it go and have compassion for myself. And I also started to have compassion for the other person. Like maybe they misinterpreted the situation. Reached out to them on like some, hey, trying to clear the air type of stuff. And then I realized that they just didn't give two F's. They're like, I don't care. Like,
So
and that just further solidifies the fact that they saw no harm in their actions. And my initial thought was to take their actions and place the blame and shame on myself, instead of looking at it for what it really was, which is this person did not care about my well-being and decided to like do a certain thing.
right. So I'm fully aware of the details of the situation. So as you retold the story, I'm sorry, just for the listeners, I don't want to like accidentally like reveal too much details, but did you
Yeah.
tell what he did? Did you say that, or are you choosing not to say that?
So I'll give a little bit. I didn't say too much, but like homeboy tried to make a move, and yeah, we'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally unprofessional, totally, um, just totally not, totally inappropriate, totally like, totally misread the
So
situation. But then after reaching out, I found out he didn't care that he misread the situation, because he only had one objective, where my objective was to network and make more friends.
yeah, you sound professional, so I'm guessing that either you work or you either you work with them, or maybe you work that person works at like like you want to build like a professional connection either inside
Yes,
the company or
professional
outside the
connection.
company. I'm not gonna say whether or not this person worked for the company or not, but yeah, you said unprofessional, so that just made me think about that. And yeah, that
And the context was, initially this coffee thing was supposed to be a coffee meeting. I was very specific with my language for a
yeah.
reason, because I didn't want any misrepresentation or miscommunication. So I specifically said, "Hey, let's meet. Put something on my calendar. Send me a calendar invite." Um, and yeah, they totally, not only did they misread this situation, but even after me confronting them and being taking off the armor and saying, hey, this is how you made me feel, like maybe there was like some misinterpretation, some miscommunication, this person was like, screw you, I don't give a damn.
Yeah, that's really unfortunate. It's really effed up what that guy did. Yeah, and yeah, and you didn't do anything wrong. So I'm glad. We talked about it obviously a couple of months ago,
Yeah.
and I'm glad that you stopped blaming yourself, because you did the best that you could in those situations, and it's also at the end of the day it's not your responsibility. So you shouldn't take ownership of that. What that person did to you was completely up to them, and they should be held, in my personal opinion, accountable for it. So so you don't have to, like, I guess, emotionally hold yourself accountable for it and start retroactively thinking, yo, what could I have done to make this situation not happen? Because you start to blame yourself, and you start to realize that, hey, this person had an agenda. You could have done everything absolutely perfect under the sun, and this person was going to, like, make a move in a very inappropriate way. So
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, that seems to be a sad reality like a lot of women face and things like that. I think you handled it, pretty well. You certainly handled it the best way you could. And yeah, I don't really have anything to offer just besides that. It's messed up. And I'm glad you're not beating yourself up over it, because it's nothing that you could have did better, or you shouldn't even have that mentality. I mean, we talk.
Yeah. But that I think that's the power of having like just a good support system in general.
Yeah.
Because when you start to spiral down that shame, it's good to have people in your circle that can pull you out. So not only did like you and Carlos help pull me out, but the icing on the cake for me was talking to my significant other about it and him pulling me out of it as well and saying like, you didn't do anything wrong in the situation. Like I was just
cool about it.
He was mad cool. I was so, you know how worried I was.
Yeah, like,
I was like pacing around the block like, oh my gosh.
I forgot what he said. He was like, oh, word, that happened. So that's cool.
He's like, you attractive,
yeah,
babe.
Like, did you get that ice cream that I asked for? Like, I forgot what he said. Like,
No, he didn't. That would be mad wild. Like, yo, like it happens. Like, you got that ice cream though?
Yeah, so
you got the cookies and cream.
And let's do a quick callback. We don't have that much time. Sorry, I've been hopping in and out of the convo trying to like keep track of time. But let's do a quick callback. So you I forgot my thought. Oh,
it's okay.
Oops.
We were talking about shame and how this ties back to shame.
Oh, edit point. I don't know if you want me to say it.
What time is this? God dang it.
I'll just go bleep it out.
We can bleep it out, yeah.
It's gonna be like a blur.
2:35. All right,
we're just gonna keep this in here. So so-and-so, I accidentally said his name. So-and-so in that moment of trying to be empathetic could have like just got enraged, overreacted. What was that thing that you said? Was it block and tackle or boot and shovel? But
boot and shovel, like I'm gonna kick his ass.
He chose not to do it, but instead he focused on helping you out. And I'm pretty sure you really appreciated that he took the moment to really console you and to take care of you in that moment instead of making it about his ego and him being hurt. So shout out to Bleep.
Yeah, shout out to Bleep.
So we're approaching time. So do you wanna speed through the story we tell ourselves and vulnerability?
Yeah. I think I'll leave it up to you because I feel like we talked a lot about vulnerability, but do you have any last like comments or some top of mind thoughts you want to share before we move on to the stories we tell ourselves?
I have nothing to share about vulnerability because it's just sprinkled all throughout this podcast episode. It's that is the premise of the book. If I can share anything, is that daring leadership or dare to lead. I'm starting to forget the title.
Dare to lead.
It is. You'll get it by then. You're probably thinking like, does this dude really read this book?
I'm like, he didn't read this book. Poser.
But a lot of it comes from the power of vulnerability. That's like her thing. If you were to do research on this, on Brené Brown, she has a TED Talk called The Power of Vulnerability. So because we're not going to cover it in this podcast, if you want to check out and learn more about vulnerability from this author, I encourage you to type in on YouTube the podcast by Brené Brown, not the podcast, the TED Talk by Brené Brown called The Power of Vulnerability. And
and she has a website.
Give it a watch. It might be BrenéBrown.com. But if you Google her name, she's pretty popular. She's like one of those people like that I never knew who she was until I read her book, and then all of my friends was like, oh, I love that author. Or I started seeing like Instagram clips of her. I'm like, yo, what? I'm like, is this like, sometimes I feel like Facebook be stalking me, but I'm starting to see like in my feed, like Brené Brown, like, wow, like it's like one of those things that you learned and you start to see everywhere. But, all right. So next topic, let's talk about the stories we tell ourselves.
Oh, I'm excited about this one.
Yeah, go ahead. Go for it. I want you to take it away.
Okay, so I will be brief with this one, but the stories are a brief summary. The stories we tell ourselves are those thoughts that we have when we are in a situation and the negative thoughts that we have. So for instance, a story we might tell ourselves is, let's say, Terrance and I are talking and for some reason, maybe he's staring off into the distance, right?
Man, and I told you I was sorry, man. Stop holding it against me. Like,
don't stop doing it. But That's easy, staring off into the distance,
I'm
right?
I'm
And
editing my podcast and go. All right, whatever.
he's staring off into the distance, you know. And the story I might tell myself is, this dude ain't listening. And that might be furthest from the truth. So the stories we tell ourselves is, yo, this is my perceived reality. And instead of challenging my reality, I'm just going to roll with it.
So
A story. Oh, go ahead.
sorry, you go. You go.
Oh, so a story that I have really quickly. I want to talk about this, a story that I told myself and that I got over.
Okay.
So, as you know, Bleep travels a lot. Oh, that's cool. We're just gonna start calling him Bleep. I'm gonna call him that in real life. I'm
Yeah.
like, hey, Bleep. Bleep travels a lot for work, and because of that, they're, you know, shout out or flashback to the Attached podcast. There, you know, there can be intimacy level differences when you're, you know, in a space where you are like hundreds or thousands of miles apart. With that being said, especially if it's ongoing, with that being said, you know, we were on the phone talking, blah, 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 blah. And the conversation, we had been playing phone tag for like a couple hours, and the conversation only lasted for, I don't know, like 2 minutes. And this was the first conversation that we had in like, we had in like pretty much days. And the story that I told myself when he had to get off the phone. He was like, oh, I gotta go. Bye. Click. And immediately I was like, God dang it. Like, I just wanted to talk. And like the story that I started to tell myself was, you know what? He doesn't miss me because he obviously doesn't want to talk to me or make the time to talk to me. So he doesn't miss me. However, I combated that instead of letting that run rampant and, you know, and a lot of the times the stories we tell ourselves are due to insecurities, right? Insecurities or fears. And, you know, so for some reason, I'm like, man, he must not miss me. Even though I know that's a lie, because, you know, he misses me because I'm awesome.
Okay, Paige.
Sorry. Couldn't resist. But with that being said, I was like, okay, well, instead of going off, because you have two options when you tell yourself a story. You can roll with it, which will lead you to a dark place, or you can combat it, which then you give that person the opportunity to either validate that the story you're telling yourself is true, then you can, you know, work on it together and combat that together, or that person will deny and say, you're actually, that's not what's going on.
So repeat those one more
So
time. It is
mhm.
deny, validate, and
Oh, and just roll with
roll
it.
with it. Okay.
So I decided not to just roll with it, because if you just roll with it, you're making assumptions and your assumptions could be false. So instead, I decided to take a more passive, not passive, but just a different approach where I didn't combat it face on. I decided to take off my armor and be vulnerable and say, hey, I'm having a really bad day. I'm really struggling today and I miss you. I know that you're busy, and right now it just kind of sucks because I'm just hypersensitive, or not. I don't like the word sensitive because, you know, people can easily say, oh, you're just being sensitive to dismiss you. But I'm like, I'm having a really tough day today, and I miss you, and this is really challenging for me at this moment right now, like presently. And from there, I allowed him. I said, I hope you have a good day. I'll talk to you. Call me when you can. And he ended up calling me like a couple hours later and say, oh, I miss you too. And that right there just combated that story that I told myself. So you can either, you know, when you get into this situation, I could have just rolled with it and been upset all day, like, this dude don't miss me, I hate him. Or, and, you know, probably would an argument would ensue at some point.
Mm-hmm.
Or I could have asked, like, hey, the story I'm telling myself is that you don't miss me because of X, Y, and Z. Is this true?
Yeah.
And then he'll either say, yeah, that's true, or no, that's not true. And then I decided to take just a more wordy approach, which is, for me, I just kind of just tell you how I'm feeling. And in me telling you how I feel, you'll either confirm or deny. You'll say your feelings are valid. I miss you too. Or you say, actually, I don't miss you. um, and that's still that I'm still getting that either confirm and deny of my reality. But that's the stories we tell ourselves in a nutshell. Hopefully that was
No,
clear.
that was very clear. That was very clear to the point that, I mean, you kind of like touch bases on everything. I think to a certain extent, the story we tell ourselves, like when I think about how do we write those stories, I think the magical thing that help us write the stories that we tell ourselves is what we choose to give attention towards. That's important to say
Mm-hmm.
because there's so much information our brain can process at once. And we have this bucket or we have this paper on like how much of that we want to actually store. And so we start pulling bits and pieces and things like that. And we create this story. But the story, it can summarize what happened pretty well if done correctly. But on the other hand, if you're drawing from the pieces that may be influenced by your biases or your by your emotions and things like that, you can end up telling your story that may not absolutely be true. I mean, I think you talked about it
Mm-hmm.
earlier in the podcast when it comes to jumping to extremes and using always and never. I feel like you spoke about it.
Probably an attached. I don't remember.
Maybe, or maybe we talked about it off air because me and you've been talking for a couple of hours even before we started the podcast. But yeah, when we choose to give attention to certain things, we choose to highlight those things, and sometimes we feel an emotion, so and that emotion can be negative, and then we just start pulling bits and pieces from what actually happened in an event, and we start forming those stories based off our emotions. So sometimes we tell a story just to
Mm-hmm.
validate our emotion, and it might not actually be true. And I've dealt with that when it comes to other people, and I'm pretty sure I've done that when it comes to other people. I feel this type of way, so I'm just looking for positive reinforcement. So guess what? This event happened, and I am going to get highlights to this situation, and I propose that story to someone else, and they might conflict with me and be like, well, this is what happened, but you're not paying attention to those parts. You're only highlighting these parts. And then when that
Mm-hmm.
person challenges you, you start to put those pieces together and you have the actual story. And you can sit there and be like, all right, maybe I'm giving too much attention to this. So when it comes to stories that we tell ourselves, I think sometimes the pen that we write the story is attention, or we choose to give attention to rather.
I agree. And a lot of the times, I feel like we're giving attention to our insecurities.
Yeah.
I feel like that's the main driver.
Yeah.
Either your fears. I think fear is just another way to say insecurity,
Yeah.
personally. So you're giving attention to an insecurity, and that insecurity is what's writing that story. The insecurity is setting the tone for what you're going to pay attention to in your
Yeah.
story. And it's always good, in my opinion, and according to Brené Brown as well, in her opinion, it's always good to, when you are writing a story, validate that story with the person you're writing it about.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean like totally. Totally. I mean, you really touch bases on it like pretty heavily. So I don't know if I got much to share about the stories that we tell ourselves. I mean, just if I get like one small tidbit, it would just be like, we all have a life story that we tell ourselves. And this is like the macro view of all of this is like, and this is like, okay, this is a combination of our life story and our events. And who we are as people is often based off the story that we tell ourselves. Now, so many things have happened to us in life that we may only give attention to a certain subset of things because we want to craft this story. Some people have a story of victimhood, some people have a story of success, and it's a whole spectrum and umbrella of other stories after that. Yeah, that's just something that we when we have that story, we can almost become too attached to it. Not to bring a call back to another book, but if we come too attached to that story, we can almost live in a false reality. Like this story that we tell ourselves may or may not actually be true. And at any given moment, because we have so much information, we can just choose to rewrite the story. Maybe what happened to me in the past doesn't make me a victim. Maybe what happened to me in the past makes me a survivor. Maybe what happened to me in the past doesn't produce a shortcoming, or this thing that happened to me wasn't a bad thing, but it was actually a setup for a good thing. I'm just giving examples here. I mean, you covered it all, so I'm just like you're just adding like uh, just tertiary and secondary information. And so
No, it makes
yeah,
sense. I do, for people listening or watching, we all tell ourselves stories. We've all done it once or twice, whether it's you're telling a big story about your spouse or your parents or your sibling, a family member, a friend, Or if you're telling a small story about a
Yeah.
coworker who maybe they brought up something in a sprint and a bug. Let's say you're a developer and they brought up a bug, and even though they weren't trying to sneak dish you at all, you took it as a sneak dish because you're
Yeah.
insecure because you know your code is buggy. So we've all done it on a scale. I like to think of a spectrum of severity, how deep that insecurity goes and how deep the conflict goes. So I do challenge you guys to identify a story that you've told yourself recently, and one, did you combat
Yeah.
it? And if you didn't, you know, in the future, think about like, okay, then, or even if you're currently telling yourself a story, combat it. Go to the person and tell them, this is the story I'm telling myself. This is how, and that takes a lot of vulnerability and taking off that armor. Like, it's not easy.
Yeah.
Um, and that's another way to build
Mm-hmm.
trust. So just try it out. See, the worst case scenario, they'll be like, get out of my face with that.
No. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a perfect wrap for it. Is it okay that I do like some quick transitions because we're approaching the 3 hour mark here?
Let's do it. Let's do
Okay,
it.
so I quickly wrote a question of the day, at least a question to the listeners that we're not going to answer it, but I want to give it to you guys based off the conversation that we have had, and that question would be, what would you do if you didn't have any fears? So really think about that. If you can remove all fear off of the table, what would you do in this world, in your life, and why? And if whatever your answer is, that may be the one of the most truest answers that you can give, and that may be the truest version of you. So try to think about it, remove your fears, and think about what would you do, whether it's like in a relationship with a person, job, your ultimate end goal in life. If you didn't have any fears, what would you do in these moments? Next, because we're wrapping up.
Oh, wait. It would be nice, like, if you feel like sharing it, put it in the comments, because I would love to read what some of you, even though it will probably be a lot of anonymous people, I will really love to see what would people do if fears were detached from it or erased. And hey, maybe next podcast we can read one or two.
Yeah, that would be great. That would be great. So speaking of next podcast, and this is because we're wrapping up, let's talk about our next book. Our next book is a bit of a transition. We've been very introspective lately with the Attachment podcast, and now we're doing Dare to Lead. And I promise you, we're gonna we're not gonna be so deep and have people so emotional during our podcast. This next one is an economics book by a very sought after and a very well respected author. This book is called, you want to show the book right now, Paige? This book is called The New Geography of Jobs. It's a book that me and Paige have read. It's personally, if you ask me what's my favorite book of 2020, it's my personal favorite, I would say. It have taught me a lot about how economics and how jobs have shaped American culture, society, and just a bunch of broader other topics that we can't wait to cover. So yeah, just be on the lookout. We do an episode once a month. This is the December episode, and for our next episode in January, the end of January, it would be the New Geography of Jobs. Is there anything else you would like to cover, Paige?
No, I'm excited. See you guys. Oh,
Yeah.
Aren't we having something special? Or are we gonna wait to announce the special?
We should probably wait to announce it just in case we can actually make it happen, and let's not make any public commitments. So yeah, we're excited to do this. We're gonna pivot away from the attachment and the Dare to Lead and get into a totally different topic. And we really hope that you enjoyed it. We hope you enjoyed this podcast, and we really hope you enjoy the next one. That's it for me. So thank you.
Yeah, and insert outro music.
Okay.
Thank you for coming, and yeah, jazz hands.
Yeah, so deuces.